Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Random Future Radio. It is the Carcast coming to you after USC's 41-35 win over the California Golden Bears at the Coliseum on homecoming in front of 64,000 USC fans and some Cal fans as well. As always, I'm your host, Michael Castillo, joined along with my co-host here in the Random Future studio in Los Angeles, Alicia Artola.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. We are back for another Carcast, a super late one. It is after 11 p.m. I don't know how long we're going to go tonight, but we're going to go. You guys primed and ready to discuss USC's effort tonight. The Trojans, of course, win again. They run their record to 8-1. They still remain 1 point away from a perfect 9-0 record. And yet, they let Cal back in the ball game in the second half. Needed Caleb Williams to put it away with a zone read keeper late in the game in the last final minutes to get the victory. If you're joining us here live on YouTube, welcome. Thanks. Hop in the chat. Give us your thoughts about the game. Tell us what you think happened tonight for the Trojans against the Bears. All of your thoughts, put them in the comments here, and any questions, put the word question at the beginning. We'll be sure to get to those as we go on and discuss the game here. Alicia, what are your thoughts? Your initial thoughts? It was a game. It was a football game.
It was a football game.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a snoozer. Like I am tired. I'm exhausted. Like I was less like there's a lot of people who are really mad about the defense at the end of the game. I was like, I get it, but mostly I'm not mad at the performance. I'm mad that game took so damn long because I am tired and that game was a slog and I just wanted it. Like, I just wanted a fourth quarter where we could sit back, relax, start prepping for the Carcast, and we would be ready to go and, kick back our feet and not have to deal with anything. And instead, we ended up in, like, a situation where I didn't think for 1 second, even after the onside kick, anything like that, for 1 second, I didn't think that Cal would actually put USC in danger here. Even after they scored the 2-point conversion to get within 6 of USC.
Yeah.
I still never felt anxiety about the result because if push came to shove, if USC needed Caleb Williams to go down and score a touchdown, I just have this like supreme confidence in him being able to go down and score a touchdown. So I never felt anxious about the game. But it was a weird game because they let Cal back in it because the defense does look utterly horrendous.
Yeah.
Because the offense looked shaky at times and continues to do that thing that you and I'm not really interested in having the debate again because we've had the debate, but like doing that thing where I'm like, does Caleb Williams really need to throw the ball 40 times in a game like this? Like, could you just hand the ball off and just put this one in the crock pot and let it stew and then just like finish off the game, like that kind of thing. But I'm not going to complain about the offense because they got the job done. They scored 40 points. You score 40 points, you're going to win the game. That's fine. I think this game just sort of highlights where this team is at. The offense can survive having their 2 best receivers out of the game and still have huge performances from players who step up. And the defense cannot survive having anything be at a less than ideal place. The defense cannot survive having 2 starters be out and injured. It's really that simple to me. It's a margin that I think USC fans should certainly look at and say, like, that margin shouldn't be that narrow. But also, I've come into the whole season saying that the defense was going to be a work in progress, that they were going to be at a disadvantage, and that this was going to be what it was going to be like. And losing Eric Gentry and Raylan Goforth, and I think Eric Gentry, absolutely huge miss. I think we're starting to see that, like, even Raylan Goforth, who I think is not as essential a player as Eric Gentry on a competitive defense, even he alone is a huge miss when you're starting guys with the limitations that a Shane Lee has when he's got that cast on his wrist and he's vulnerable in pass protection. Tuasivi Nomura should not be a starting linebacker for USC at this point. He just should not be, and they shouldn't be putting him in the position where he is the core of that defense. I just think they're not setting up to succeed when they have him out there. You asked the question, what does that mean about the other players that USC has on the roster that they can't be trusted to go in there? I think it says a lot. But this defense it's a mess. It's a wreck, and I don't know how to fix it. We knew coming into the season that it was going to have some growing pains and struggles, that they were going to be limited in the personnel, and that is exactly what we're seeing. And so you had said to me, like, as we were sitting on the couch watching the game, like, there's just proof that, like, this isn't a playoff team, but I think you and I already knew that. So,
well, yeah, I mean, for me, I look at it as, for most of this game, it was in that happy medium between blowout and close game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, wasn't
Is it
a blowout.
A happy medium, though?
No, awkward medium.
Yeah.
So here's the weird thing. I think SC has been in that medium spot, right? Where almost every game this season, maybe save for the Utah game and the Arizona game. So really the first half of the year plus tonight, for the most part, and I guess the Arizona game could be in this too, where not quite a blowout, not quite a close game. Ultimately, the Cal game and the Arizona game ended up being a close game, right? But it's in that medium to where it's you're this close away from SC getting a pick six, and then suddenly you're up, like, 28 points, 30 points, and then Cal's taking out their starters and everybody, and we can all go home, and like one of those kind of things, right? But you just don't quite get there. And to SC's credit, we talked about it before. We talked about it after the ASU game. We talked about it the Washington State game. If your clunkers are going to be 16-point wins over Washington State, that's such a good problem to have.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, SC living in that region of, like, not quite a blowout, but also you never really were worried that SC was going to lose this game at the same time. Like, relatively good problem to have. You'd rather have that than the alternative of SC having to pull every game out of its ass, or SC losing these games, which are things that we've seen year in and year out from this program in the old regime, right? So SC has certainly taken a big step forward. And there's part of me that looks at it and is like, well, living in that region where you're not quite a blowout and not quite a close game shows that you're an improved team, but you're definitely not a playoff team, playoff caliber team, because the playoff caliber teams end up pushing games into blowouts more often than not. They end up separating themselves. They end up putting themselves in a position to win the style points. Yeah, you might have a game like Ohio State had against Penn State last week, right? Which was close for the first, 3 quarters, but then you have the fourth quarter where you blow things open,
or
right? Like
Michigan Rutgers
today. Or Michigan Rutgers, where you might have a bad first half and then you blow things open. That's what we saw with the Pete Carroll teams of the past, right? SC is not in that position yet. And on one hand, it's frustrating because you're like, if they could only just string these little things together, if they didn't have this one blown coverage to let Cal back into the game, or
the onside kick,
or if you don't give up the onside kick, or if Taj Washington doesn't drop a third down and maybe you're able to build more momentum here, if they score the drive that was supposed to be the 2-minute drill before the Kalen Bullock interception that led to the actual 2-minute drill drive touchdown, like if they do that, end up scoring 14 points before the half instead of 7, like these little things, and to blow things open, like that's what a playoff team does. That's how you win style points. That's how you separate yourself, all that stuff. And then I look at it and say, but this is year one. This is year one of a system that is completely different from last year. We talked about it where SC has playmakers that Lincoln Riley inherited, but also a very problematic defense, a defense that was horrendous last year. And so should we be completely surprised that sometimes they look horrendous this year, right? Probably not. And at the end of the day, this is year one, and they are still 8-1 through 9 games, control their own destiny, sort of, kind of. There's a weird three-way tie possibility that doesn't, but that's beside the point. In this position to basically have their fate in their hands, going up against, Colorado, who we all think they should win, should beat next week, and then a winner-take-all sort of potentially LA City championship game for the right to go to Vegas, right? Like, you have that, but at the same time, you look at it and you go, this defense, as it stands right now, has no shot in stopping DTR. No shot in stopping Bo Nix. No shot in stopping Cam Rising in a rematch. They made Jack Plummer look like Aaron Rodgers, right? like going in this game, we talked about how Cal and Colorado are going to be the two teams where it was going to be a lull because they didn't have offenses that could compete with SC. And yet, here we go. Cal finishes the game with 469 yards, including 406 through the air with Jack Plummer, who looked incredible at times. And part of it was because he was throwing the guys who were wide open. He was throwing the guys who would make like one little shimmy and lose 3 different defenders and break 3 tackles. Like, I don't know. I don't know. It's in the grand scheme of things, this defense is just not going to get it done for SC. And then the flip side of the argument is, but it's year one. It's year one in a completely, new regime, and they were never going to be perfect. And they're 8-1, which is ahead of where they probably should be anyways. So it's one of those situations where it's like,
I mean, what it comes down to is you're 8-1. You're 8-1. Your offense has been good enough to carry you to 8-1, and the one game where they weren't, your defense came through and made sure you got that win. So you're 8-1. You're 8-1, and that one loss is a 1-point loss. Yeah. So you can't be that bad. Like, there are levels, and I think that this is where people need to understand that we always talk about like rankings and stuff. You can do rankings, whatever, but there are tiers. When it comes down to it, there are tiers. The tiers are the elite teams and the good teams that can be really difficult to beat. And
we learned today, I think we got more clarity on what those tiers are.
Yeah, it's Georgia and everybody else, and Ohio State and Michigan and TCU and maybe LSU you throw in there, but I don't know, Tennessee and also all of those ones you can throw in there. And USC is in the tier below that. And this is a team that was 4-8 last year.
Right.
And to be in the good but maybe not elite category is perfectly fine, is a perfectly fine place to be at. The offense is way ahead of where I expected them to be at this point. The defense is about where I expected to be at this point, especially when I can look at it and see how I just want USC fans to challenge themselves for like a quarter to only watch USC's linebackers, just watch the linebackers, and then come away and tell me that missing Eric Gentry and Raylan Goforth isn't a big deal.
Right.
Like, the linebacker play is horrendous. And there are other issues that USC has with the DBs and with the defensive line and all that kind of stuff. But like, for me, the linebacker play is absolutely horrendous. You cannot possibly be a decent defense with linebacker play like that. So to me, Eric Gentry's absence is a huge deal, because he was USC's best defender for the most of the games at the start of the season. Well, for better or for worse.
Tuli is a different.
Yeah, Tuli Tuipulotu, fine, at that level of the defense. Yeah. So that's where USC's at. They're missing their best linebacker. They're missing their second best linebacker.
Yeah.
Their third and fourth best linebackers are not good enough. And they are struggling. But they're still winning the games because Caleb Williams is that good and Travis Dye is that good and USC's second tier wide receivers are that good.
Mhm.
So I think that you can have a discussion about like the playoff situation and whether or not USC would get killed in the playoff or what DTR is going to do to this defense and stuff like that. But I still want to know who is going to stop Caleb Williams. Is the UCLA defense that we saw today parallel at literally the games were going on at the same time, parallel games? ASU was doing to UCLA what Cal was doing to USC. So when you look at it, like, okay, the UCLA game is certainly a potential loss, but it's not a guaranteed loss. That's going to be a shootout, and we're going to see. I think you put on Twitter, that looks like a game first to 50 is going to win that game. And
Yeah.
USC may be the first to 50 and UCLA may be first to 50. And if they're not, they're a 2-loss team, which is still in the range of what I optimistically predicted before the season started. And the Notre Dame game is going to be tough. Like that's the reality. But I don't know. I'm not freaking out. I see people freaking out. I'm not freaking out. Like it's,
well,
I don't know what people expected from the season, I guess. So like the offense is really, really, really outrageously good. That's what I'm sort of taking away. The defense is bad. Yes.
So to the point of the defense is bad. I go back to SC has played 9 games. Through those first 6, we sat here and said that Alex Grinch was the better of the 2 coordinators. The last 3 games laugh at that statement. Hasn't aged well, right? Surely not. And so I sit here thinking, okay, so with the first 6 games when we were talking about how the defense was opportunistic, the defense was led by SC's front, really the front 3, front 4, right? The defensive line and the corners making plays. Tuli Tuipulotu leading the country in sacks at one point and all that stuff, and all the sacks that SC was getting as a team, and keeping teams like Washington State to 16 points. Cam Ward really didn't do much against SC. ASU in the second half did absolutely nothing, right? There were second half adjustments in every game, and you saw SC get better. At least defensively, you saw SC get better as the games went on. So my question is, SC held Oregon State to 14 points on the road. Was all of that a mirage? Or is it all of this go back to not having Eric Gentry out there? Because Eric Gentry goes out in the third quarter of the or halftime or whatever it was of the Utah game, and it was the third and fourth quarter where SC really got gashed against Utah, and that's when Dalton Kincaid really took over the game. Like, does it really all come down to just not having Gentry out there and not having Raylan Goforth, your 2 best linebackers at this point? I'm comfortable saying, because
like by far,
Shane Lee I thought looked utterly terrible tonight.
Except for that one tackle for loss he had.
He had one tackle for loss on a first down play, but like in coverage, the last Cal touchdown drive, there was a third down in which SC sort of blitzes a ton of dudes. Shane Lee takes one step forward to the line of scrimmage and sort of stops. He doesn't blitz. He doesn't drop back in coverage. And the receiver just runs a little slant and is wide open. Yeah. Well, if he dropped back in coverage, he would be right there. If he blitzed, I don't know, maybe he disrupts the passing lane. Maybe he, makes Plummer hurry the throw. I don't know, anything. But like the middle ground of like not doing either one of those things just ends up with a, super easy third down conversion. But like, and not to pick on Shane Lee, I just go back to
because Tuasiti Namora was worse than Shane Lee in this game. But I
go back to, is this really all not having Eric Gentry? Is Eric Gentry, is it the sole reason for the defense being this bad in the last 3 games and this bad at, not having second half adjustments and all that? I have a feeling the answer is no. I have a feeling the answer is somewhere in the middle. Well, Eric Gentry plays a big role, but at the same time, SC was probably in the first 6 games. Like the Washington State game and the Oregon State game, where Willie walked away and said, wow, this defense is really making the plays when they need to, and they're coming through and they're holding down teams and all of this, that, they were getting the stops at the right times, but we were able to overlook the lapses in things like success rate and whatnot because the scores didn't look bad. And because they were able to get the stops at the end of the game when they needed to against Fresno State. So they gave up 17 points instead of 24 points. And it's easy to say those things at that point, right? Versus now where they're not getting the benefit of the doubt. Well, and on top of this, they're just utterly gashed.
Hold on, though. And this is why people are resistant to the idea of one player can't possibly be that important. But Talanoa Hufanga was that important to the USC defense. Eric Gentry is the only linebacker USC has who is capable of even being half decent at pass defense.
Yeah.
The pass coverage, if we were rating it in Madden, and you give Eric Gentry an average in pass coverage, everyone else is 20 points lower. He is literally, and I mean literally, the only linebacker apparently on USC's roster who can be out on the field, who can be in pass coverage and not have it be a complete and utter disaster. So yes, it makes a difference that he's not there, because then guess what? Guys like Jake Plummer are able to gash the center of your defense for 400 yards because your linebackers are nowhere to be seen because Shane Lee doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, sorry, Jack Plummer.
Jake Plummer could have thrown.
Jake Plummer would have thrown for 500 yards too. Why is it so resistant to think that in the games before, USC gave up 14, 28, 17, 14, 25, and 14? That was what USC's defense was. For 6 games, that's what USC's defense was. And then, magically, USC's defense over the last 3 weeks has been 43 points, 37 points, 35 points.
Yeah.
What is the difference? What happened against Utah? Injuries struck against Utah. I know people don't want it to be that simple. And yes, there was certainly an edge of the turnover luck. Because USC is still forcing turnovers. We're not forcing 3 and 4, but also who was helping to force those turnovers? Who was tipping balls in the middle of the field so that USC safeties could be in the right place at the right time to catch those interceptions? Eric Gentry was. So don't tell me, why are we so resistant to the idea that, yes, Eric Gentry might make that much of a difference for this defense?
I think
USC wouldn't have ultimately lost to Utah with Eric Gentry on the field? I think they might have lost to Utah anyways. Do I think that Arizona couldn't have scored 30 plus points against USC with Eric Gentry on the field? They certainly could have. But there's a very clear delineation to me between what this defense was when they were relatively healthy and what this defense is now when they are absolutely 100% utterly not healthy.
Yeah.
And it's that simple. There was zero give for this defense, zero cushion or wiggle room for this defense. Complete opposite of what you get on offense, because when you don't have Jordan Addison and Mario Williams, you just turn into Michael Jackson show and Taj Washington show. And in a game where last week it was the Kyle Ford show, well, this week it's the Michael Jackson show. Who will it be next week? Maybe Terrell Bynum comes out of nowhere to get 7 catches in this game. Maybe Terrell Bynum is going to be the one. It is ridiculous that USC can have their offense be what it is without Jordan Addison and Mario Williams available to them. The defense does not have that depth at all. So when you lose someone like Eric Gentry and then lose the next best guy like Raylan Goforth, yes, your defense is going to take a plunge. It's going to happen. And all the other little things. I think
there's a difference between taking a plunge and now averaging 20 more points per game.
Yes, well, because what happens? Every little thing becomes that much more devastating, because Sierra Wright, being a young guy who's getting cooked a couple times now, is devastating to your defense, because you're not getting the stops, because you cannot get off the field on third down, because the third down plays that maybe Eric Gentry was making 2 or 3 times a game are suddenly turning into 2 or 3 touchdowns that the other team is scoring, because you're not getting off the field. Like, I'm not trying to act like Eric Gentry is the end all and be all. I'm not trying to act like if Eric Gentry was here, USC would suddenly be a playoff caliber team. I didn't think they were a playoff caliber team with Eric Gentry on the field. But this defense is certainly better than they are now with Eric Gentry on the field. And it would be a lot better with Braylon Goforth on the field. So that's my answer. I mean, people can say I'm simplifying it too much, but to me, it's a very simple and obvious answer. There's a clear line of delineation between before the injuries and since the injuries.
Yeah, that's the thing for me, is it's difficult because it's so that the line is there, which makes it easy to say that is the answer. I just think there's more to it than that.
Well, obviously there's more to it. Yes.
Yeah. I don't think it's just Gentry. I think there's a lot of stuff, but Alicia, let's get into a bunch of questions and comments here in the chat over on YouTube. Things have been going off. A bunch of people having their say, and we appreciate it as always. If you're following us, be sure to subscribe, like the channel, like the stream. It helps grow the show here as we grow and grow over on the old YouTubes. Cameron says, how desperate should SC be in getting Gentry, Goforth, Addison, and Mario back? I think the answer's pretty desperate. I think the question here needs to be, how desperate are you to get them back for Colorado versus UCLA, though? Because here's a question. If let's just assume that all 4 guys are available to play against Colorado, do you sit them anyways?
No, I have them play on a pitch count.
Okay.
I want them to get a couple drives in, I think. I want them to not be coming back in totally.
Well, the crazy thing is, this sounds, Colorado is like bad. Yeah. But I don't think SC has earned the right the last 2 weeks to treat Colorado like a preseason game.
Yes, but Colorado is like Arizona and Cal are good teams, but Colorado is on another level of bad.
Like this should be like the SEC when they're taking a week out to play Furman.
Yes,
but
this is as close as USC will get in conference play in a long time.
Yes, I know this is the closest thing to playing Mercer or whatever, but SC, given the last 2 weeks, I don't think you can absolutely, pretend like it is.
That's fair.
Jason says, tonight is the first night I'm legitimately mad at the defense. The performance was unacceptable. I think for me, the problem with the defense was the breakdowns just being as horrific as they were.
Terrible.
The long touchdown in the beginning of the fourth quarter where they bid on the pump fake and the guy just walks into the end zone. Horrible. The very first drive of the game, the tackling, I don't know what the tackling on the very first touchdown. The dude went through like 4 different defenders.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even grab. It was like, I don't know. It's like going through a car wash,
Yeah.
So I get it. I think that to me is you can be a porous defense that is struggling with talent and with all those things, but SC, even though SC doesn't have the talent that you want them to have on defense in their depths, still better talent than Cal has. And they can still look prepared and all those things. And I think that on defense, they didn't always look that well tonight, which was sort of the issue. Well,
and that's and I think that's why I would agree that like I'm more angry at the defense this week than I have in other weeks, because I would have wanted them to come out of the Arizona game with a chip on their shoulder, with a point to prove. And it didn't feel like that at all. Like, it felt like the defense, like, didn't prepare well for this game at all. And that is disappointing. And maybe it is a situation of they're sort of falling into the trap of, Cal sucks. Cal's offense sucks. Like, we don't need to worry too much about Cal because Cal's offense sucks. And you can't do that in conference play. You really can't, because even though Cal's offense sucks, like, they're still Power 5 level players, and the quarterback is still capable on his day. Jaden Ott is still capable on his day of gashing you, and I think that's what we saw. So it felt a little bit like they weren't taking this one seriously, and I think that's why everyone is a little bit more frustrated with the effort, because it didn't look like there was a lot of fire or mental preparation or readiness or.
Well, we got a comment from ABC that said I was waiting for a game like this and it happened. Yeah, the sort of like no-show game.
Yeah.
Every team has one. It was bound to happen at some point. It's good that you still win that game.
How great is it that in a no-show game USC still scores 41 points?
Yes, I mean, yes, for sure. Is this the no-show game of the season? If it is, again, good thing that you won it. The other point about it is when you go up by 20 points, put your foot on the throat and walk away at that point.
Yeah.
So sleepwalk your way to a 20-point win rather than having to eke out a 6-pointer would be a little bit different. Artist formerly known as Jabroni Jabber Brody says, we will probably be number 7 on Tuesday with this defense. We are nowhere near as good as the 6 teams in front of us. I think that's a fair point at this point. I don't think anyone's arguing that, right?
No, and I think that USC will.
SC's got to prove it.
USC will only be in the actual playoff conversation. Everything about USC being in the playoff conversation right now is hypothetical, because it all requires USC winning out.
Yeah.
A USC team that is bad as people feel like this team is tonight won't beat UCLA or Notre Dame, and they won't be in the Pac-12 title game, and they won't win the Pac-12 title game. A USC team that does those things will have proven that they are far better than they appeared tonight.
Yeah.
So it's all sort of in a hypothetical and all in a show me what you've got kind of element. I think people are upset because the display tonight again suggested that USC isn't capable of doing those things, winning out and getting to the playoff, which is fine as far as I'm concerned. I mean, people will disagree, but for me in year one, USC has already exceeded my expectations and is already in a position to have what I would term to be a successful year one.
That's the weird thing about it.
Yeah.
Yes. I think in a lot of if there was no context of year one, I think that I would look at this way differently than I do with that context. For sure. 100%. And yeah, I'm not always going to give, Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley the benefit of the doubt that way, but in year one, I think you can. Yeah. Year 2, 3 down the line, no, things change, right? Like at that point, you need to see improvement as we go. Ron Campbell says 8-1, but I think we go 9-4 in the end.
No, I don't know about that.
I don't know.
I think it's certainly possible, but that's a pretty pessimistic view of the end of the season.
I go back to the thing I said about the UCLA game on Twitter. Like, even if we can sit here and say that DTR is going to like absolutely rip SC's defense a new one or whatever.
Why couldn't Caleb Williams do that to them?
SC do it to UCLA? Like UCLA, what SC did to Cal tonight, UCLA did the same thing with ASU. Their win probably looks a little bit better. It's on the road. I think their offense probably looked a little flashier tonight. They had all their stars there. SC's without a number of guys, and if you get those guys back, that's only going to help SC's chances.
I mean, USC. Can we go over the guys that USC was missing? How many starters are out for USC currently? Andrew Voorhees, Bobby Haskins, Cortland Ford, all out on the offensive line. which we don't need to mention because Mason Murphy has done a hell of a job filling in at left tackle. Good on him. Jordan Addison, Mario Williams, Eric Gentry, Raylan Goforth.
Yeah. I don't know.
Seven. I mean, that's a lot of starters.
I mean, Voorhees played tonight, but
okay.
It's yes, there's a lot of starters there for sure, and I think that's where it's difficult to truly judge a lot of the defense. But I think that a lot of those guys missing are still on offense, and the offense is doing their job without those guys. Shows that the offense is significantly deeper, right, than the defense is.
So. Yeah, and that's what we know. I just would caution people about what comes is going to come. And if this defense isn't good enough to beat UCLA, then USC is not going to beat UCLA. And guess what? If that's a reality, then you move forward with it and you go for it and like you deal.
Well, it's again, it goes back to the perspective of like the year one situation.
Yeah. No, it's year one. You still, like, to me, if you lose both UCLA and Notre Dame, that's a disappointment because those are rivalry games and you want to win those every year.
Yes.
And you don't want to go 0-2 in your rivalry games. But if you do and you end up with 9-3 because your defense looks like the 4-8 defense that they were last year.
But here's the thing for me.
It is what it is.
So Randy had a question that says, I understand the defense is in year one, but you would think they would improve as the year goes on. I don't see that. What say you? And to me, this is what the thing is. Like I talked about it in the preseason. I wanted to see SC that it wasn't about the wins and losses for me. It was about getting better as the season goes on. I think the offense has gotten better as the season has gone on. The defense has not done that. At the same time, the defense has had a significant injury, and really their two best linebackers are out. So, like, again, how much of this is the defense not improving as the season goes on, and how much of it is strictly because of Gentry and Goforth not being there?
I thought the defense was improving as the season went on.
I thought they were too until the last 3 games. Until the last 3 games.
And you all have already heard my rant on that.
But I go back to you talking about the UCLA thing. UCLA scored 62 points last year. If the whole thing about year one is improving, then you cannot give up 62 points to DTR and UCLA again. And as it stands right now, I can see a world in which 62 points happens again.
Yes, and that would be disappointing for sure. And it would be proof that USC needs a lot of help on defense, which we already know.
Right. All right. Josh says, do you think SC will drop in rank because the D is what they are? Like, okay, if we talk about the rankings, first of all, this was such a long day of college football. There's a very good chance nobody saw SC's game tonight, which is all the more reason for why winning by a bigger margin would have behooved SC.
Yeah, because USC could have looked like utter crap and gotten out of this with 41-20. What was it? 41-27 at a certain point.
That would have looked better.
That score would have looked. No one bats an eye at that score.
Right. At one point, it was 27-7. It was 34-14. 34-14 looks better, right?
Yeah.
All those things, yes. You want to know my honest to God thought about the rankings? I don't think SC moves or falls or anything.
Well,
I think they're going to stay like right where they are.
The USD is going to stay where they are and shift up in the exact same way that everybody else is going to.
No, I don't necessarily think they'll shift up.
You think they get jumped by LSU?
So who are the teams that falls above SC right now?
Alabama.
Tennessee lost, Clemson lost, Alabama lost.
Yeah.
LSU is one spot behind SC. I think LSU bumps up. Clemson falls but stays ahead. Tennessee falls but stays ahead.
That's entirely possible for sure. And again, like, and it, as we, I don't know who the commenter before said, like, I think where USC is right now in the rankings is a fair ranking for USC.
Yeah, I think so.
I wouldn't move UCLA ahead of USC based on tonight's results. They played mirror image games. Like it's not nothing changed between those two in terms of the rankings.
Yeah.
Oregon got to beat up on Colorado. I don't judge it very, very much. LSU, very, very impressive win. If they want to move LSU ahead of USC, I could not complain. If they don't want to drop Alabama or Tennessee or Clemson behind USC, I could not complain. Like that's fine because where USC sits right now is still these 3 weeks.
Lot of comments, by the way, about Clemson's loss being too bad that they'll drop.
Well, and the
problem is that
skepticism
so many people lost that I don't know that teams are actually gonna be punished for their losses.
The thing about Clemson, though, is that like I feel like everyone has been skeptical of Clemson the whole time, like just waiting for them to finally get got. And now that they've gotten got, I could see them getting punished for just everyone thinking like DJ Uiagalelei is just not a good quarterback, and that team didn't look like they were going to make it through anyways. So maybe they drop, but either way, like it doesn't really matter. USC in the stretch between Arizona, Cal, and Colorado was not going to face any team that would give USC an argument to move up in the rankings. UCLA and Notre Dame will give them that ability. So if they just stay put where they are, you still just have to beat UCLA and Notre Dame and get to the Pac-12 title game, and then the rankings will sort themselves out. For right now, the rankings are irrelevant to USC.
Yeah.
Because a big win over an impressive win over UCLA makes people forget that USC wasn't that impressive against Arizona or Cal. Like,
the playoff committee, for the most part, with the exception of Georgia, I think the playoff committee has cared more about who you beat than anything else.
Yeah,
I think it is weird to me the conversation about Georgia this morning, like watching game day. They beat Oregon, but blah blah blah. Yeah, they beat Oregon, but. And yet you look at like Pac-12 Twitter, or you look at, comments that we get and everything, and people absolutely are using Oregon's 49-3 loss as their eliminator, right?
Yeah.
Like that is actually absolutely the indictment on Oregon. They deserve nothing because of that. And yet it's weird how Georgia gets like no credit for that win at the same time. Like, you can't do both things.
Yeah, like, it can't be meaningful and not meaningful at the same time.
Like I understand the argument that week one game, means less now based on how the season has gone on.
Then
the
more
two teams are in different
results,
places and all that stuff. But you can't completely, slam one team and not give the other team any credit at all. Like you can, ¿por qué no los dos? Right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But anyways, the point is, the committee's gonna weigh their decisions on who you beat. If SC continues to win games despite not having these perfect looking blowouts, then that's going to include a win over UCLA, a ranked team that's going to be top 10 or top 10 adjacent in a couple of weeks. It's going to include a win over Notre Dame, who will be ranked at this point. And potentially, if they go back to the Pac-12 championship game, it will include a win over a top 10 team, whether it's Oregon or Utah. So, like, they will have won their way into having those respectable wins. Am I holding my breath if that happens? No. But if it does, SC will be in a position to be ranked high accordingly.
Yeah, but I guess it all comes down to, like, right now, would you predict that happening? Now, I would not.
No.
I think that this
Surely
team
not.
finishes with I think USC loses to UCLA and beats Notre Dame, and
that's 10-2.
That's 10-2, which is a really good record for a team
for in year one.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Hokie P, who are you most impressed by, the tight ends or Michael Jackson III?
Michael Jackson III looks like
he looks incredible,
a dude. And it's nice because one of the things that I came into this season thinking about with the wide receivers was, okay, obviously you have Jordan Addison, obviously you have Mario Williams, but you do need to start seeing like, okay, who are going to be the dudes who take over when Jordan Addison leaves for the NFL? Like who's going to be the guys that step up and become the stars next to Mario Williams and move that way? And I think that Michael Jackson is making his argument on that front. So really, really cool to see him doing that. And also, last week it was Kyle Ford. This week it was Michael Jackson. It's been Taj Washington both of these weeks. So does Taj Washington have another year of eligibility after this though?
Yeah. He had 1 year at Memphis, and this is his junior year. Plus, so technically, he got a free covered year. So
yeah. So it's really cool to see those guys step up and prove that next year's wide receiver core, and then you're going to add some really, really great recruits into that mix, is still going to be completely stacked.
Yeah. D in the chat says, this is the podcast where someone predicted Utah beating USC, but want to rep SC. At least be a sports podcast, not a USC podcast. Of course, you would think that SC would lose to UCLA. For real? Did you even go to USC? No, Alicia went to Notre Dame, which is why she's hedging her bets here about SC potentially. She's saying right now that Notre Dame is going to lose to SC, but come back later, and we're going to see she might change and go with her homer pick for her Irish.
I'm sorry that you're mad that somebody on a sports podcast was correct about a game prediction. I am very sorry. You do you, bro. You do you.
Let's go with Anthony, who says,
How dare I, Michael?
Anthony says, why would anyone think that a quarterback throwing for over 400 yards is on the linebackers? That is on the secondary. Linebackers play a small part in that. Yes, I think there were absolutely breakdowns in the secondary today, which I think was a problem. 100%. I think that we saw Tia Wright get torched on a big long play. I thought he's had a very good year, and that was uncharacteristic to how he's played this year so far. That's a problem. We talked about the pump fake that was the touchdown early in the fourth quarter. That's on the secondary, 100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the linebackers absolutely still play a big role when you're talking about how the game progresses, passes over the middle of the field, things like run support, how everything adds up. It's the linebackers do play a significant role, especially when the problems with SC's linebackers is how they drop back in pass coverage.
The 11 players on a defense are all part of the same ecosystem, and they all impact each other. Kalen Bullock's interception is only an interception because the defensive line gets pressure and forces Plummer into a bad throw, and that he puts too much air on because he's rushing it, and Kalen Bullock succeeds because of it. The linebackers not being able to cover for crap makes it that much harder for every other element of the defense to do their jobs correctly. In part because you can't get off the field if your linebackers are giving up third downs. You can't get off the field if your linebackers aren't in their run fits. You can't, all of it it's not just the linebackers, but having the linebacker play be as bad as it is negatively impacts every other element of the defense. And the DBs aren't off the hook. They had a rough day. The defensive line is not off the hook. They have their own issues with run fits and making sure they get to the quarterback consistently. But I'm sorry, I can't even concentrate with some of the stuff in the chat right now. It's a whole ecosystem that feeds into each other. So yes, the linebackers being bad make it very difficult for the rest of the defense to be good.
Yeah, it's a whole mixed match of everything. Let's go to a comment from Michael Madden, who says he's gone to bed. It's on the East Coast and it's late, but super proud of this team. They put us back on the map, and we're playing for games that matter again. This team and the coaches were 8-1, and I'm super proud. So, yeah, it goes back to there's two ways of looking at this. You can be frustrated. We talk about the frustrations about the defense. Absolutely. At the same time, they're 8-1. Despite that defense, they're 8-1 a year off of a 4-8 season. They're 8-1 in year one under Lincoln Riley, and
8-1 for the first time since
2008. And this is like historically one of the greatest seasons, if not the greatest season, as any first-time head coach at SC. So like this is what was
they said John Robinson. Yeah.
It was John Robinson's first season in what, 76? 77? I'm looking this up.
You're the historian here.
I'm
just the Notre Dame 76. I'm the Notre Dame grad who hates USC.
Yeah, he was 11-1. Yeah, so but completely different situation. J. Rob was taking over a team the year before that had I guess they were 8-4 the year before, but they were 2 years removed from a national championship in 76.
Yeah.
They lost the first game and then won the final 11. Pretty good. Went to a Rose Bowl. So yeah, I mean, Lincoln Riley right now is 8-1, three wins away from matching that through 12. So this is a weird situation where yes, there's absolutely struggles, but on the historical side of it, SC is absolutely performing in a way that you got to feel good about the future. GLBC says, question, do you think we need a complete defensive overhaul? Do you think we will hit the portal for defensive players next year like we did on offense this year? Yeah, I think the portal is going to be a situation that's going to be a permanent fixture to where you go to suit your needs. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see what SC can do in the portal next year, because you will have seen all the places where SC benefited. You can go and say, hey, come to SC, look what Eric Gentry did after we brought him from ASU. You can be next year's Eric Gentry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look, to see what happened. You see what happened with Travis Dye? He was great in our team. Now, look what you could do. Like that pitch, I think, is going to end up being able to be sold pretty heavily this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, even more on the defense, the bodies that USC brought in, because they were just bodies that they needed, are getting a lot of playing time. They're on the field for USC. Tyron Taleni is in there. Solomon Byrd is in there. Bryson Shaw has now taken over as a starter. So you can absolutely point to the availability on defense for people to come in through the portal. I think that you need to also create some expectations is that players like the additions that USC got on offense are harder to come by in the portal, I think.
Yeah.
And so, is there going to be an All-American addition to USC's defense? Probably not, but that's why the job on defense was always going to be harder. I think you need to be aggressive in the portal to bring guys in. You need to be aggressive in recruiting to add as many stellar talents as you possibly can, and then continue to go from there. We saw what impact, to me, a single addition in Eric Gentry has done for the defense just by his absence, right? So if you find the right guys, especially those young guys like Gentry, I mean, who's the guy who had spring at Utah who's now injured? Carson Tabarachi, he's a guy who's been injured, so you haven't been able to turn to him. But if he was healthy, maybe he would be the key to this defense being different. So I think you can find those guys like the Gentry types and start to fill in your gaps and then grow your defense. But it is going to take a little bit more time than it will just from the offense, just for that reason. Yeah,
Ari Lopez says should have used the portal this year for defense. I think they did. They did use the portal for defense. It's just we talked about it before, that the impact players that they got on defense don't match the same level of impact players they got on offense. Part of that's just because the offensive players are at the skill positions. The defensive players that SC brought in on defense absolutely can and have made an impact. We've talked about Solomon Byrd earlier in the year on the defensive line. Eric Gentry, literally the guy that we've talked about, could play a huge role in why the defense is struggling in his absence with him out. Literally a transfer, right? Mekhi Blackman, who's been a hell of a performer for SC at corner, is a transfer. They've gone to the portal. It's just that surely, Shane Lee, the guy who was supposed to be SC's stud linebacker going into the season, was from the portal. It wasn't for a lack of trying. I just still think they're going to continue to do that as we go forward for sure. Dr. Carly Yu says, now that Bryson Shaw is healthy, can we move Max Williams back to nickel and get Jalen Smith off the field?
I think that is ultimately to the benefit of the defense, if that's what happens. I thought Bryson Shaw came in and did a pretty good job. I thought he was active. Certainly not perfect, but I thought he was by far not the biggest issue on the defense today. He was making tackles out there. He was throwing his body around. So I appreciate that. That to me would be the ideal, just because Max Williams, I was always skeptical of Max Williams at safety, just for pure body type. Like, I just would want somebody with more length back there at safety. And I'm more comfortable with someone with Max Williams' body type at nickel, and certainly being closer to the line of scrimmage, which is where he has thrived in the past. And we haven't really seen him be able to make the same kind of plays that he was making early on in his career when he was playing nickel. We haven't really seen him be able to make those plays with him back at safety. So hopefully that is something that moves forward as Bryson Shaw gets healthier and more established within the defense for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that secondary continues to develop. I put the over-under at 7.5 Bryson Shaw tackles. I don't want to spoil the following episode, but he got over that tonight.
He did, yes.
He got over
quite a bit, yeah.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Mark says, why was Rilic on the field so much? He did almost nothing other than run fast and drop passes. One of the things that we've gotten questions tonight, or I've seen comments in the chat of why is there nobody else but Travis Dye? He can't do it all himself. And then we get a question about why is Rilic on the field so much? I think you want to develop somebody else. So yeah, it's not just Travis Dye. At the same time, Rilic Brown looked like a freshman tonight. He's going to look like a freshman sometimes. The loss, I thought that one drive, absolutely, it was 2nd and 3 and went to a 3rd and 11 on a loss of 8, where he ran backwards. He did the Marquise Lee thing of running backwards. And while Lee could usually run backwards for 9 and gain 7 of them back and only lose 2, Rilic's not there yet. He lost all 8.
That's classic freshman, though. Like, Ronald Jones did that as a freshman. Joe McKnight did that a lot as a freshman.
Right.
You see that from young guys. You see them you see them always looking to break the big play instead of taking what's there and then breaking it from there. So, yeah, like you said, he looked like a freshman today. There's a reason why Travis Dye is running back number 1, and why guys like Austin Jones and Rilic Brown are fighting for scraps behind Dye, because they are not as trustworthy as Dye at this point.
Yeah, and no blocking, no Rocky.
No blocking, no Rocky.
Yeah. Comes back to that too.
But at the same time, you do want to get somebody with Rilic Brown's speed involved. Like, I think there's an argument to have him on the field and see what he can do, but you're going to deal with growing pains because he is a freshman, and you're going to have to work your way through that.
Yeah, I do think that you need to be in a better place to where your number 2 running back in terms of production has more than 2 carries tonight.
Yeah.
Travis Dye, 15 for 98, 2 yards.
So close.
Away from his 100-yard run. 15 for 98, and then you have to go all the way down to Austin Jones, 1 for 5, and Rilic Brown, 2 for -1, including a long of 7.
Yeah.
Because it was the 7 and the negative 8 yard,
Yes.
which was
Yeah.
the backbreaker there early on in the game. Wish I had a vet. Love that name. Love it. So me too. So I think I'd be cool with the Camaro, to be honest. But a vet would be nice too. As the physicality that was lacking the past few years come back, yes.
On offense, I think.
Defensively, yes. I think surely it's there is a lack of physicality. We saw that with the broken tackles early on in the game, and I think that you see that sometimes where sometimes there's guys around a pass catcher who just catches the ball and then he's able to pick up a few more yards because they're not able to secure the tackle quickly enough. And that's something that SC needs to overcome. At the same time, I think this is an epidemic in college football all told.
I think it's one of those things I suspect that is more closely linked to the consistency question. It's like from a one play to the next. Like there are plays where it feels like USC is being physical, but the difference between USC being physical on 1 out of every 2 or 3 plays and like the Georgias of the world who are physical on 3 out of every 4 plays, like that ultimately will make a difference. That will set apart the physicality of one team from another. So to me, it's just about USC bringing the physicality on every play. And I don't think that that's what they've been doing. They did do a much better job after that first drive where they completely lacked any sort of sense of knowing how to play the game or be physical or do anything. I thought they had a really good response in the middle 2 quarters of making those plays, winning at the line, getting tackles for loss, getting sacks, getting in and being physical up front. And then they just sort of fell back, fell free of it. Like, so I don't know.
Yeah, a couple of questions. NAN and Chase, what is going on with Foreman? Can we say Foreman is a bust? I don't know. I'm hesitant to call players a bust.
I'm especially hesitant to call players who are playing defensive front a bust when they are still extremely young relative to. I know obviously not everyone can be the, Leonard Williams who comes in and is freshman and is immediately amazing. But like, to me, sometimes guys have to mature, not just physically, but mentally. And I wonder, for Foreman, do you write him off? I don't know. Some might want to write him off. I personally don't want to write him off yet because he has been dealing with some injury stuff. He's been dealing with some concussion stuff. That stuff is always difficult to sort of get a handle on. So
I don't think it helps that JT Tuimoloau looks incredible at Ohio State from week to week, especially last week. But so like that direct comparison doesn't look well. But as Danny says in the chat, Kyle Prater was a bust. Yeah, and I don't think Corey Foreman is there yet. He's not Whitney Lewis. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, Troy Miller in the chat says, I won't call Foreman a bust until next year, but I think he's definitely a 4-year player. Yeah, I think, is he a bust relative to like number 1 overall player in the country? Sure, yes, that's bust, but rankings are also a crapshoot to a certain point. So can he be a contributor for USC? Don't write him off from that perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. TAC in the chat said earlier on that Georgia absolutely shut down 2 of the best offenses in the country. Super impressive. Yeah, I mean, they made Tennessee look real average today. And that's on top of making Bo Nix and Oregon, who have scored 40 points in 8 straight games, held them to 3.
Yeah, and you think about that, Hendon Hooker has been the Heisman favorite for a while now. they're now all day. I just saw people talking about like Bo Nix being back in the Heisman conversation, all of that. And you see what Georgia has done to those two quarterbacks who are upper echelon quarterbacks. That's Georgia. Like, that's Georgia. And when you look at what Georgia's able to do on the other side of the ball, their offense isn't as spectacular as some of the more spectacular offenses that we've seen, but they have a quarterback who knows what he's about. They have a team that believes in their quarterback, and they have some real great playmakers, and that is extremely dangerous. And that doesn't mean that Georgia is a perfect team that can't get, swamped up by Mizzou, which is still like what happened there? Like, that happens. But when it comes to the big games, for me, I don't bet against Georgia. I'm at the point with Georgia that I have been at for a long time with Alabama, and that's obviously not the case this year, but in general, it's safe to just don't bet against teams like Alabama and Georgia when they have proven so often what they are.
Yeah. Well, we talked about, the sleepy game. Was this SC sleepy game?
Yeah.
The Mizzou was Georgia's sleepy game. But to talk about, Georgia and whatnot, I think you have to talk about the grand scheme of things. Today was a hell of a day for college football, and which is
It's insane.
SC obviously gets a win in a week in which so many teams lost. And I think that is huge, especially when you're able to run your record to 8-1 and stay in the hunt and all that stuff. That is paramount. At the same time, the SC Cal game, absolutely a dud on the in terms of entertainment compared to everything that went on. The Alabama LSU game going into OT, insane. Big shout out to Jaden Daniels. Looks like LSU's finally developing him into something that ASU couldn't. I always thought that he was disappointing at ASU. I always wanted more from him at ASU. Like they just felt like they stopped developing him, and they couldn't get anything more out of him. And then he goes to LSU, and that run in overtime was like absurd.
Yes.
Right. Big night for them, and a terrible night for Clemson. Notre Dame beats them, which we talked about earlier. Will look good for USC because not only does that take Clemson out of the playoff race, at least the undefeated race aspect of it, but now it's probably going to give Notre Dame a ranking and a chance for SC to have a ranked win later on in the season in a couple weeks back at the Coliseum. I want to run through the Pac-12 side of things. Friday night, not good for SC. Oregon State had plenty of chances early on and didn't finish off their drive.
So Anthony in the chat says not all wins are good ones.
Yeah.
I disagree just philosophically because I watched that Oregon State game and I also watched Ohio State against Northwestern today, and that was an absolute mess. But also,
that was painful to
watch.
If
you survive those kinds of games, if you get the win, you get to move on and not have the loss in your loss column.
Survive in advance.
Yes. So Oregon State did not survive in advance, and there is something to be said for teams that can figure out how to do that. And the reason why Oregon State will not be ranked as opposed to other teams out there who continue to survive in advance is that's the difference.
Yeah. I mean, to Oregon State's credit, their 3 losses this year are to 8-1 SC, 7-2 Utah, and 7-2 Washington. They've only lost to good teams.
And Washington, again, Washington's biggest problem is that they're in that same mold of they're sort of they're decent, but not good enough to be in competition with the USC's, UCLA's, and Oregons of the world. So
right.
It's not a shameful loss, but that was absolutely a game that Oregon State could have won, and an Oregon State that deserves to be ranked should have won.
Yeah, for sure. Utah takes care of business 45-20 over Arizona. In that game, Jaden DeLara, only 159 passing yards. That's how you bottle him up. That's what happens, I guess, when he goes to Rice Eccles. Nothing much there. Oregon laid the wood on Colorado, as you would expect, 49-10, 8 straight games in which the Ducks have scored 40-plus points. Pretty much what you'd expect.
That's the model
Colorado.
for what USC wants to go in and do next week against Colorado. That's the model.
Yeah, 100%. And UCLA in a wild one, 50-36 over ASU. A game that I thought we were watching it on the second screen, kind of mirrored the SC Cal game.
Blow for blow.
Like, it never got to the blowout points. UCLA was never truly in danger, but also they let them hang around a little bit. But UCLA getting the touchdown at the end, making it a 2-score game, makes it look a slightly better.
Yeah.
But still, they gave 36 points.
I just love that within the same moment in those two games, Cal scored a touchdown and then converted a 2-point conversion to get within 6 of USC late in the fourth quarter. And ASU scored a touchdown and converted a 2-point conversion to get within 6 of UCLA late in the fourth quarter. And those things happened within 30 seconds of each other. It was incredible. Like,
yeah,
what is going on?
The artist formerly known as Jabber Brody said our Pac-12 defense is the new Big 12 bad.
That's what it feels like.
Yes, it feels like that. At the same point, I think, genuinely, I think there is a big rise in quarterback play in the Pac-12 right now. Pac-12 has always been a conference of really good quarterbacks, but I think the elite quarterback play you're really seeing it right now, where at one point Michael Penix was someone in the Heisman hunt, and I think he's still going to get votes at some point. He's producing an elite level. DTR looks incredible. Bo Nix looks incredible. Caleb Williams looks incredible. Those three guys, pick your poison for who's the best one is going to get first team quarterback. I think it's crazy that somebody's going to get left off. There's going to be a really good quarterback. There's multiple really good quarterbacks this year that don't make the first or second team All Pac-12 quarterback list. But we haven't even talked about Cam Rising.
Yeah, but I think this might be one of the things that, in the midst of USC being really bad for a couple of those seasons, the Pac-12 was really down. And in those seasons, it felt like
we had talked to
the quarterback play in the conference had sort of taken a dive.
What was it 2020 where, all the talk around SC was that Keaton Slovis had taken a step back.
Yeah, but he was still the best
quarterback in the conference.
Yeah, he was still the best quarterback in the conference, and that reflected poorly on the rest of the conference, right? Well, now Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in the conference, but all of the other quarterbacks in the conference are really good, and the transfer portal has helped with this. But DTR has taken that step forward, and getting the COVID year certainly has given him the chance to develop into his sort of fully fledged self. Penix transfers into Washington and gets to play for Kellen DeVore, who is a much better offensive mind than what Penix had at Indiana. Bo Nix gets to transfer to Oregon, where he too is playing for a significantly better offensive mind than what he had at Auburn. And we're seeing that the quarterback play in the conference across the board is just much better this year. And I think that's why the offenses in particular, this season feel like they're that much better, because Jake Plummer is one of the worst. Jack Plummer is one of the worst quarterbacks in the conference, and he's still capable of having a 400-yard game against certainly not a good USC defensive performance, but he's not a terrible quarterback like this.
Look at Jaden Delar. Jaden Delar is someone who is a big volume producer, right? We talked about it in the Arizona preview pod that Arizona going into the SC game last week was 5th in total passing yards per game, and the per game stats are super flawed. So take that for what it is. But he's a high volume passer, right? And it's crazy to think that he is such a high volume passer, and yet he's probably maybe the 6th best quarterback in the conference.
Yeah. Yeah.
That tells you how deep the conference is.
And that's a little bit more of how it was, 10 years ago when you would have that like Washington State quarterback who would just be like a good quarterback, but not in the upper tier. There were like 4 of them in a row, Holiday and what's his face. You know what I'm talking about.
Mustache guy.
What's his name? I don't know. Either way, but yeah, you know that.
This is why I don't like live podcasts. We need to
It's
go back to
12:30. Our brains are not working.
Yeah. All I can think of is Anthony Gordon, but there was just one season of him.
Yeah.
But there was a question from Kyle: is quarterback play looking so elite because the defenses are terrible? I don't think that the defenses are any necessarily worse than they were before. I think that the quarterbacks are legitimately better. Honestly, like I think that it could be a mixture of both for sure. But I just think the quarterbacks are better. The Bo Nix thing is weird because, he was just horrible at Auburn, like Ari Lopez says. Like the numbers comparatively were terrible. I didn't think he was going to be that good at Oregon, and yet he looks at Oregon like what Justin Herbert should have been.
Yeah.
Because Justin Herbert coming out of Oregon, I'm like, I don't understand the NFL hype. I don't get it at all.
Yeah.
He's been like fine, but like not incredible. And then he goes to the Chargers and suddenly he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I'm like, where was this dude at Oregon? Well, here's Bo Nix doing the inverse. So
and I just looked at not that these are like end all be all, because out of conference numbers are hard to track, like who are you playing out of conference, stuff like that. But like just looking through the splits on non-conference games, quarterback ratings and all that kind of stuff, like no, the quarterbacks all look like they're just good. Like straight up, like in terms of statistical output, it's there. As somebody, I think Anthony in the chat was saying, like in terms of the eye test, it's there. The quarterback play in the conference is just higher than it had been a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Rama says we're going to stay up till 2 when the clocks turn back.
I hope not. Please don't. No, I hope we're done with this and I can go straight to bed and sleep and enjoy my extra hour of sleep.
It's just a good time for me to get on a rant about the time change. I've got a take. I can. This is a good time.
It's a good time.
Apparently. Okay, so here's the deal, folks. If you've watched Veep, one of the greatest shows of all time, clearly you know Jonah Ryan ran on a great premise of getting rid of daylight saving time. Here's the problem. Everyone wants to get rid of the time changes. As being someone who lived in Arizona for 4 years, there is nothing worse than not changing your clocks. Trust me, you don't want that. All these people like, California should go to not changing the clocks. No, you're a crazy person. Don't do that, because you know what happens? Everybody else changes, but you don't, which means you have to spend your whole next month recalibrating your brain. Wait, hold on. The Alabama game is on at 3 Eastern. Oh shoot, what time is 3 Eastern? What time of year is it? Carry the one. You know what I mean?
Like, see, but this is the problem with soccer too. Is
it's horrible.
Europe or England changes their clocks in a different weekend than we do in America. And so then there's like a 2-week span where all of the games are at a different time than they normally would be, because they're like the NFL where they have time slots, right? So like there's always a game at 8:30 on a Sunday, or there's always a 9:30 game on a Saturday, whatever. And so it changes. And like that 2-week period is hell enough for me to know that I would not want to go through the Arizona thing.
Now imagine
of having it for months.
A worker who works in a company that is global, and I have meetings with people all around the country and around the world. And so what does that mean? It means if you live in Arizona, suddenly your meetings are all over the place because They didn't move for you, but they moved for everybody else.
See, and this is where I agree with Dave the Greater.
If you want to get rid of daylight saving time, you need to get rid of it for everybody.
And that's what Dave
universally.
What Dave the Greater said in the chat is the entire country should trash daylight saving times. But I'll go even further. The entire world can trash daylight saving time.
Yes.
And then we don't have to deal with this anymore because it is an out of date practice that made sense in the past, but no longer makes sense for the modern world.
But if the world isn't going to do it, then you need to conform to whatever the most number.
So we need to
doing.
appeal to the UN is basically what we're saying.
What I'm saying is the idea that California should be on a different thing, and then of everybody else. No, you don't want that. Trust me, you don't want that. You don't want to have to recalibrate your brain twice a year.
No.
It sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. Trust me. It sucks.
Get rid of it all. I'm just really upset because I realize that I love the summer months when the sunset is when it is, and tomorrow night is going to be such a depressing night because the sun is going to set at 4:00 in the afternoon. It's just me
Danny says it's already been passed in Congress with the sunshine protection law or whatever. Again, it sucks, man. It sucks. All others will do the same. If they all do the same,
but that's the thing is once the U.S. does it en masse, I think then there will be incentive for other countries who do the change to not do the change anymore because everyone else has started to switch away from the change.
I just want to have everyone be the same. That's all I want.
Yeah.
Not the same one time zone. Can you imagine if we had one time zone like horrid. China? How wild that would be?
No, I'm not on board with that. No, thank you.
It'd be 8 a.m. on the East Coast, and it's 8 a.m. over here, and it's still feels like 5 a.m., but it's really 8 a.m.
After a while, it would become similar to the way that in the Northern Hemisphere, we just Christmas is during the winter, and that's us. But in the Southern Hemisphere, Christmas is during the summer, and that's just what it is for them. And so we would just get to a point where when you say 8 a.m., you're not meaning what we currently think of 8 a.m.
is. 2 p.m. sunset?
Yeah. That would just be the way that we function.
Yeah. Anthony, all this is confusing to me. It's 12:37.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this thing up. Thanks for listening as always. SC, of course, 41-35 winners over Cal. SC 8-1 and moves on a short week to play the Colorado Buffaloes later on this week on Friday night, 7:30 at the Coliseum. So we'll see what happens with that, which at least gives SC an extra week, an extra day of rest going to the UCLA game. So anyways, here we are. As always, thank you for joining us, everyone who's joined us here on the chat and had a little talk with us after the Cal game. You can email us at rantoftroy@fansided.com. You can follow Alicia on Twitter at Penguin of Troy. You can follow me on Twitter at MichaelCastFS. We will be back on Monday night to look back at the Cal game, and then we'll be back Wednesday to look ahead at the Colorado game. So join us then live on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, where you can leave a review. And here on YouTube, of course, you can subscribe to the channel and like the stream. It helps grow the show. Lisa, you got any final thoughts?
I hate USC, and I want them to lose every game. And I will cackle maniacally when they lose.
Because you're a Notre Dame grad.
Because I'm a Notre Dame grad.
Yeah.
Who's a hater. Yeah. That's me.
All right. Until then, see ya.
See ya.